After no further ado, thanks for bearing with us there. We are the Winnovators. I'm Jimmy Antoniotti. Unfortunately, Gabe Casey couldn't be with us today, but he's here in spirit.
I'm Allie, Kuhl.
And Kevin Wildey.
And we'll be presenting today on managing stress at Notre Dame. So just a quick little overview of what we'll be presenting today. We'll address the same question that we all know so well by now, and then we'll basically walk through all the steps of the design process in the same manner that we ourselves embarked on it throughout the semester. So we'll go through the process of understanding exactly what the problem is, who's involved in it, what are their perspectives. From there, we'll go on to our ideating process, brainstorming, coming up with some hopefully good ideas, and then moving on to the prototyping process, testing those prototypes, and ultimately converging on what we hope is a good final solution. And at the end, we'll take any questions that you might have. So the challenge: how might we improve the health and well-being of students at Notre Dame? I'm sure we're all getting tired of hearing that by now, but as fourth-year seniors at Notre Dame, we thought that we had a pretty unique perspective, like other students, in being in the shoes of a freshman, sophomore, junior year, and we wanted to try to hopefully incorporate our experiences at Notre Dame collectively in coming up with a final solution. So for the first stage, what is understanding what exactly is this problem? First thing we did sitting down in class was we tried to come up with our own definition of what the problem was and come up with what our own point of view was. So one of the major problems that we found at Notre Dame, similar to the past group, was that going back to freshman year, there's so many unknowns at Notre Dame. What's your major going to be? What career is that major going to lead you to go on to be? And are you going to fit in and have friends and enjoy this 4-year ride while you're figuring out those things? So we kind of thought all of these unknowns early in your career at Notre Dame created a lot of anticipation, stress, anxiety, and that might be an issue. So with that point of view kind of defined, we embarked on a little environment scan. So we went around campus, we looked at the library, Business Information Center in Mendoza, we went to more recreational areas like Rolf's, The Rock, the dining hall, study lounges in our dorms. We even did a little more informal observations at some off-campus spots, but the observations were a little hazy at some of the bars. Basically just trying to get a very well-rounded sense of what the environment was for students and how it might be influencing their health and well-being. So what we did seem to find was that areas like Hesburgh Library, the BIC, we see a lot of groups of students stressing over many of those same issues that we kind of thought we would identify on our own, trying to look at it as objectively as possible without any personal biases. But basically with these observations, we embarked on our ethnographic interviews, and all 4 of us interviewed at least 5 undergrads, trying to get a good mix of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and pretty much identifying how they perceived many of the same problems in managing their academic workload, social life, choosing a career, and how they managed and dealt with that stress. And largely what we found was students were very aware that they had these hell weeks where they had multiple exams, presentations, and they were stressed out. And when we tried to uncover what were the types of activities they would go to relieve a lot of this stress, we seemed to find that there wasn't really much of a formal mechanism that they could really go to and feel any relief from their stress. It was more of a woeful acceptance of the situation. So when we tried to identify any formal methods of de-stressing on campus, the only thing we could really think of was end of semester, during finals week, we have stress busters. So if students are stressed for the entire semester and there seems to just be one little patchy solution at the end of the semester, clearly there could be something that we could be doing throughout the semester for all students. So based on the results from our ethnographic interviews, we kind of mapped out, going back to freshman year, a little journey map of what are some of the challenges and all these different aspects of a freshman's life at Notre Dame, and trying to incorporate, like we said, academic, career focus, and social focus, some of the highs and lows. So as we see here, some of the highs would be you're meeting upperclassmen at a football tailgate, you feel socially accepted, you feel like you have a network of people who are going to support you and that you can really make lifelong friends with. You meet a career counselor as a freshman, and you feel like you're in the right place at Notre Dame. You can go on to really succeed in a field that you're really interested in. But then we have some of the lows. You meet your roommates who you're assigned to. None of them even want to talk to you. It's not going so well. Can't pull an all-nighter like you were able to in high school. It's not so easy, and things pack. They pile on, and then at the end, you get killed in your first finals week as a freshman, and you're feeling really low. So, with this first semester experience kind of understood through our ethnographic interviews, we then attempted to take this data and try to identify some main personas that we could target in our solution. And I'll hand it off to Kevin, who will discuss those a little bit.
Yeah, so going through our interviews that we did with kids on campus, we could develop 3 personas that were quite distinct from people. You have a high end, which we'll get to in a bit, medium, and we'll start with the low end, the chillaxers as we call them, which constituted about 15 or 20% of the people we interviewed. You may or may not have high academic aspirations. As for many of our seniors, we tended to be chillaxers because we're almost done. We've got 2 more class days and a finals week and we're gone. So at this point, you're going to do the things that you want to do. You're going to go out. You're going to go out with your friends, have a good time. And if the grades don't come along with it, so be it. It's low stress. Obviously, we don't do all-nighters anymore. As chillaxers, I'll identify myself as one. We're on the way out. So that's our more of a senior range, but we had a couple freshman chillaxers. Now, the in-betweeners. This is your standard Notre Dame student. This is about 70% of the kids we interviewed, somewhere in there. You want to do it all. You want the grades. You want to be able to go out. You want to stay in good shape. You want to eat right. That's why we got into school like this. We all wanted something more for ourselves. So you're covering all the things on the ND bucket list. Everything's always a priority, which makes finals week and presentation weeks, midterms, that is rough. That was the biggest issue, that why we wanted to cover stress, because it touches so much of campus. So yeah, you've got the studying with friends, so you're not as productive as you could be. And we even had one person who runs on the treadmill with their books and studies while running at the same time. So our classic in-betweener to do it all. Then finally, we have the prioritizers. A small segment of campus, but they exist, and they schedule blocks of time to do every single thing in their day. One person that I had the privilege of interviewing blocks off, they're out of class on Mondays at 3:15, and you can't get a hold of him the rest of the night because he goes and he gets all his homework done for the rest of the week that he knows what he has. But then he's done, and it works for him. So the prioritizers also tend to be low stress because they know exactly when they're going to do the things that they do throughout their day. And you can see the desk. That is nice and organized. I haven't seen the bottom of my desk in a while. So you can see why these kids are also not anybody we're addressing. So our what if? We needed feedback from these kids. Where are you most stressed? What stresses you out? And the 2 main points we got back were that the library and the dorm spaces are used the most often for studying, which is why they're always overcrowded. If you've ever been in the library during finals week and you can feel the stress when you walk in the building, that was something that we looked at addressing. And we also found that personal relationships are the biggest stressor. Surprisingly, people worry about their academics, but it becomes more stressful for them when they're dealing with their friends or issues with family at home. Maybe they got in trouble and now they have to go to OCS. That sort of thing causes the most stress, not the academics. So we were looking at addressing either the spaces or peer support in your friend group. So we came up with maybe a spa on campus in the new building, support group, mentoring in the dorms. Is it by major, colleges, an enhanced study space that we're getting at the library or at the stadium? How's that going to look? So those were the things that we generally looked at first. And now I'm going to hand it off to Allie, who's going to cover what wows.
So after we made all these prototypes, like you said, we moved on to the what wows phase of our process. We wanted to pick an approach and look at what elements were good from that approach, what were areas that might need some help. So we turned at this point and really focused on developing a peer mentoring program within the dorms. And so we used the napkin pitch to flesh out this idea, really see if it would fill an unmet need, what the benefits would be, what our approach was, those kinds of things. So we found this tool useful. We identified the unmet need of our student group as being that, yes, everybody's very stressed. That was very obvious in our interviews and everything, but that it wasn't just academics. And then even if you were stressed with your academics, there are resources for that people have taken advantage of. But there really wasn't anything for kind of those other stressors in your life, especially maybe like the social aspects of it, or really just finding a way to balance all those different priorities. So our approach to meeting this unmet need was to really capitalize on just the social capital that's already here amongst the communities of peers. We thought that that was the best way to go about it because the feedback that we got from upperclassmen was like what was touched on before, that there were a lot of things they wish they had known at the beginning of the process that they learned along the way, especially with like what classes to pick, or maybe your career planning, how to use the career center, those kinds of things, or like I said, how to navigate the full experience of being a college student. There are things they learned the tough way that it would have been nice to know earlier. Either that or some feedback that we received was that the most valuable resources for some of the upperclassmen were mentors that they reached out to themselves and were able to share very similar experiences, had gone through things that the underclassmen, what they were going through right then, their mentor had just gone through a year ago, so they were really able to provide really good advice on those types of challenges. That would be essentially the benefit of this program as well, just having a support system of people who have similar experiences as you, similar goals as you. When we looked on campus, we realized that there's a lot of competition for a mentoring program like this. We identified two major competitors. First, with the first year studies. That's something that we all know is already here. You come in as a freshman, you meet with your counselor, you meet with your advisor. But we thought that where ours would be different is first year studies focuses pretty solidly on academics. And as we saw, that's not the only stressor in the student's life. And then also, so most of the dorms have big little programs, which are basically a mentorship program. You get paired up with someone. But what we really found is that that can be really hit or miss. Sometimes it works out really well, and you have a long-term relationship with your big or your little. But sometimes, a lot of feedback that we got was, I met them once, and now sometimes they don't look at me in the hallway. So that probably isn't very helpful for some of those people. So we thought that there was still room for another program. So based on this, we developed our first version 1 of our prototype of a peer mentoring program within the dorms. We chose to work within the dorms because we felt that that was kind of an already built-in community. Those are people that you're probably going to run into again. If you have a question, you can see them. You're going to feel more comfortable with them. The people would be divided, or it would be a peer mentoring program for all grade levels because the main of this is that underclassmen can learn from the experience of upperclassmen. So people would be grouped together, hopefully based on major, maybe just on college, depending upon numbers, how people fit together. And we started off with our first prototype with it being very flexible and with very little structure, because we know that when there's one more thing on your plate that you have to go to, one more commitment you have, that can be stressful in itself. So we wanted to avoid that. We didn't want it to feel like a pressure, certainly. So for our first version, it was a completely voluntary program that you could opt into, and basically you would just get, you would have a network of people within your dorm that you knew you could reach out to if you had a question about your classes, about career planning, or even better, just about being a college kid, those kinds of things. So we took this first version of our prototype to focus groups to get some feedback on it, see where we could improve, and then also we talked with the first year studies advisors as well as our subject matter experts. And we have a video of some of our focus group interviews.
Anybody hear that or no? No. Okay, just gonna have to bear with us here then.
That's all right.
Yeah, Allie, you just summarize.
Yeah, I'll let you know what they said. So that was a freshman who was speaking. We had a freshman and 2 seniors, and one who was an RA, which was helpful because, as you'll see in some of the feedback we got, one question was, how is this different from the role of an RA? But anyhow, from our focus groups and then speaking with the first-year studies counselors, this is a summary of some of the feedback we got. So we got some positive reinforcing feedback, which was good, that especially from upperclassmen, that this was a good idea because we got feedback of comments such as, I wish this had been something that I had had when I was an underclassman. Like they said, they learned things as they went that would have been a lot easier if they had known it beforehand, and that they also felt there were things they could share with underclassmen that would be helpful to them. And also, even if an underclassman doesn't have a question about something, there's things that you learn along the way that they can help the underclassmen plan as to where they would go with their classes, their majors, those kinds of things. What was most helpful to us was the negative feedback. Like I said, one thing that was brought up both in our focus groups and by the first year studies counselors was, how is this different than an RA? If you're just creating like a person within the dorm, a contact person that you can reach out to if you're feeling overwhelmed, isn't that supposed to be the role of an RA? And we acknowledge this, but we also think that there's still space for a peer mentor because, like we said, one of the biggest stressors can be just being a college kid. Some of those things you can't really talk to your RA about. Or maybe same thing with your big little pairings. Sometimes you don't hit it off with your RA. So maybe you're a pre-med student and you really want to know about the med school applications, but your RA is a business student and we don't know really what to do with that. So we felt that there was still a space for that. One thing that was from our feedback that was shown in the video was the purely academic focus was a bad thing, or was seen as a negative, because that would, again, put a lot of pressure on you if it was an academic focus only, because we already put a lot of pressure on ourselves for those things as is. But then the big thing that we took away from our feedback was whether or not to make this program mandatory. So like I said, in our first version, it was going to be purely voluntarily based. That way we would just get the people who felt that there was value in the program to opt in to it, both as underclassmen and as upperclassmen wanting to give back. But in talking with the first year studies counselors, we said to kind of look at this a little and just know that there are pros and cons both ways, because even though it feels like more of a commitment, or people don't want to sign up for a commitment if it's something that's going to meet a lot and be pretty structured. If it's something that's structured or presented in a way of, if you want some help, these are people who might be able to guide you. First year students especially feel like they are the only ones who are struggling. And so they say when someone will come in, they think they're the only one who failed the first chemistry exam, or they're the only one who thinks that like classes are a little bit hard because everyone puts their best foot forward. So then it would be really tough to opt into a program that is basically like saying, yeah, this is a little tough, I think I'll need some help. So with that in mind, we restructured our program just a little bit for our second and final prototype. We kept two big things that we got positive feedback on were keeping the program within the dorm, because that was where people felt most comfortable. That was something in the video that the freshman had shared, was that the people who she had reached out to this year were within the dorm, and they had been her most valuable resources already. So we thought that that was a good thing, especially because one of our assumptions with our first prototype was that people would just feel comfortable enough to have these natural conversations about the challenges of being a college student. And we also kept the structure as a whole, because we got positive feedback on that. But then We changed it a little bit, and we did, for our second prototype, we made it a mandatory program for first semester freshmen and first semester sophomores. Our reasoning behind that was because there were more benefits to be had by making it mandatory than the cost of maybe getting a little bit resentment from a freshman having one more mandatory program, because chances are with so much on their plate they might not opt into one more thing, but our feedback said there was benefits there to be had if they would connect with these upperclassmen. And so it would just be for the first semester, and they would meet monthly, and then for the second semester it would be voluntary again. So if you saw a benefit in the program, you could continue with it. It could be a good thing. If not, you could opt out of it. But then we made it mandatory a second time, your first semester as a sophomore year, for one reason, to have upperclassmen mentors for our freshmen who would be coming back, especially relatable mentors, because there's a big gap between a freshman and maybe like a senior or junior leader. They're a lot more relatable with a sophomore. So that would be beneficial to the freshmen, but also beneficial to the sophomores, because there are things that you're going to face as a sophomore that you didn't think about as a freshman that you would still gain, or it would still be beneficial for you to talk with a junior or a senior at that point. So we kept that, and then we also restructured it to the point that our meetings would be activities that you would go to. For two reasons: you would get the immediate stress relief of a stress relieving activity, and then also develop that habit that was shown in our prioritizers of having a structured stress relieving activity in your life.
So now, just to wrap things up and conclude for a bit, we really do feel that it's been demonstrated on campus through our own observations, through gathering data, that there really is an unmet need for a formal mechanism to relieve stress in students. We've experienced it ourselves, and all the evidence that we've gathered really does indicate that. And then through our ethnographic interviews, we really do think that we've targeted a certain group of personas that can benefit most from this mechanism, and that we do think would actively participate in and utilize it to hopefully de-stress and remove some of the anxiety of your earlier college years. So with that, we have our final solution that we think is viable in the sense that it addresses many of the needs that we uncovered through our own interviews with subject matter experts, as well as just talking to students on our own. And we think, in addition to being viable, it's very feasible in that we've taken the feedback that we were given from students who would be participating, and we think that it's a very well-rounded solution that students will not only benefit from but enjoy partaking in. And with that, we thank you for listening, and we'll take any questions now.
Okay, so because of our technology issue and presentation just only a couple minutes long, so we're just going to ask some questions. Sorry, question one in transition. You guys can move while you
Typically, your upperclassmen that would be mentored, would they go through any, like, even a 2-hour training about being a mentor? Because, like you said,